UPMC Memorial Hospital, a place meant for healing, became a battlefield. Doctors ran. Nurses hid. Patients clutched their loved ones. And in the middle of it all, a man with cold, empty eyes walked forward, a gun in one hand, zip ties in the other. He wasn't here to save lives. He was here to take them. Police rushed in. Boots slammed against the floor. Guns drawn. Voices shouting, "Drop the weapon." Then gunfire erupted. A hero would fall. And a nightmare would begin. But was this really the start? Or had the horror begun long before that first shot? The truth was darker than anyone could imagine. Welcome to True Crime Stories videos. I welcome you, my viewers, and most especially my subscribers, for your support as we keep improving and bringing you daily told and untold true crime stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It was just another Friday morning at UPMC Memorial Hospital in York, Pennsylvania. Nurses checked charts. Doctors made their rounds. Families whispered prayers beside hospital beds. No one knew that, in just minutes, everything would change. A security camera caught him first, a man in a heavy jacket, walking with purpose. His face calm, too calm. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was going. Inside the ICU, a nurse named Sarah adjusted an elderly patient's floor. She glanced at the clock. 10:32 a.m. Shift change was coming soon. She sighed, already thinking about the weekend ahead. Down the hall, Dr. Patel reviewed test results. The numbers blurred. He had been working for 14 hours straight. His hands ached from holding a scalpel for so long. He just needed coffee. One quick break. In the waiting area, a mother rocked her sick baby, humming softly. A janitor mopped the floor, lost in thought. Patients dozed off, unaware that a man with a gun was just steps away. At 10:35 a.m., a security guard near the entrance saw him. Something felt off. The jacket was bulky. His hands twitched. He wasn't looking around like most visitors do. "Sir, do you need help?" the guard asked. The man didn't answer. He just kept walking. Then the first scream. Sarah turned her head sharply. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to a nurse beside her. Before anyone could react, the first gunshot rang out. Dr. Patel's coffee cup shattered on the floor. The janitor dropped his mop. The mother clutched her baby to her chest. People froze. Then came the second shot. And suddenly the hospital was no longer safe. Who was the man who walked into that hospital with a gun? His name was Diogenes Archangel Ortiz. 49 years old. A man with a past no one could ignore. People who knew him described him in different ways. Quiet. Strange. Angry. Some said he kept to himself. Others said he had a temper that could explode at any moment. But what made him pick that hospital? Digging into his past, his life was filled with problems. He had run-ins with the law. A history of violence. But nothing like this. Nothing that could have warned people about what was coming. Then there was his medical history. He had been a patient at UPMC Memorial before. Some say he believed the doctors had failed him. Others say it wasn't about him at all, it was about someone he lost. A neighbor remembered something chilling. Weeks before the shooting, he stood outside his house, staring at nothing, whispering to himself. When she asked if he was okay, he just smiled and walked away. A former coworker told police something even more disturbing. A month earlier, he had asked a strange question. Do you think hospitals care about people? Or do they just let them die? Was this revenge? Was he punishing the hospital for something? Or was there something even worse hidden in his mind? A note was later found at his home. One line stood out. "They took everything from me. Now I take everything from them." But what did that mean? And why did it cost a police officer his life? In one hand, a gun. In the other, zip ties. A nurse named Lisa was the first to see him. At first she thought he was lost. Then she saw the gun. Her breath caught in her throat. "Sir, you can't be in here," she said, her voice shaking. He didn't answer. He locked the doors behind him. 10:38 a.m. A doctor reached for the panic button under the nurse's station. Too late. Bang. A warning shot into the ceiling. Plaster dust rained down. A woman screamed. At 10:39 a.m. A mother and her child were in the next room. The little girl had just had surgery. She was asleep for now. Her mother covered her mouth, holding her close, hoping she wouldn't wake up. At 10:40 a.m. A call to 911 finally went through. "There's a man in the ICU. He has a gun. We're locked in. Please send help." The dispatcher tried to keep her calm. "Stay hidden. Officers are on the way." At 10:42 a.m. The first police car screeched into the hospital parking lot. Then another. And another. Inside the ICU, Ortiz paced the room. His hands shook. His breathing was heavy. He pointed his gun at the doctors, the nurses, the patients. "You don't care about people," he muttered. "You let them suffer. You let them die." No one knew what he meant. No one dared to ask. 10:45 a.m. More gunshots. More screams. Then sirens. Over the intercom, a voice echoed through the halls. "Lockdown. Lockdown. This is not a drill." 10:47 a.m. SWAT officers entered the hospital. Guns drawn. Moving fast. They reached the ICU doors. Locked. No way in. One officer, Andrew Duarte, made a choice. A choice that would cost him everything. 10:49 a.m. He kicked the door open. Ortiz turned. 2 men. 2 guns. Only one would walk out alive. Officer Andrew Duarte wasn't supposed to work that morning. His shift had ended hours ago. He could have gone home. But when the call came in, shots fired at UPMC Memorial, he didn't hesitate. That's who he was. A protector. A father. A husband. A son. 31 years old. 8 years on the force. He had dreams outside the badge. Coaching his son's baseball team. Taking his wife on the trip they always talked about. But that morning he had one job: stop the man with the gun. 10:49 a.m. He kicked down the ICU door. "Drop your weapon," he shouted. Diogenes Archangel Ortiz turned. For a moment no one moved. The world stood still. Then, gunfire. A nurse screamed. Bullets ripped through the walls. Patients ducked under beds. Another officer dragged Duarte behind a cart, pressing on his wound. "Stay with me." But his breathing slowed. His grip weakened. By the time backup arrived, the fight was over. Ortiz was down. The threat was gone. But so was Officer Andrew Duarte. At 11:13 a.m. over the police radio, the words no one wanted to hear. "Officer down. Suspect neutralized. We lost him." Outside the hospital, officers stood frozen. Some clenched their fists. Others wiped their eyes. His wife arrived minutes later. Her face said everything. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She just stood there, staring at the hospital doors, waiting for him to walk out. But he never did. The wounded survivors carried their own scars. A doctor. A nurse. A custodian. 2 police officers. One was shot in the leg, another in the shoulder. The custodian, hit in the back, barely made it through surgery. Months later they spoke about that day. How they thought they wouldn't make it. How when they heard Officer
hoping
Duarte's
someone would
voice,
save them.
they thought maybe they had a chance. One nurse, still in recovery, said just 3 words. "He saved us." The shooting was over. The hospital halls were quiet again. But the questions had just begun. What went wrong? How did this happen? Could it have been stopped? Law enforcement searched for answers. They went through surveillance footage, Ortiz's background, witness testimonies. And then they found something. Ortiz had entered the hospital without resistance. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. Despite carrying a gun and zip ties, he walked in like any other visitor. Security cameras showed him loitering near the ICU entrance for 10 minutes before going inside. 10 whole minutes. Enough time for someone to notice. Enough time for someone to act. But no one did. When police examined his past, they found warning signs. He had mental health issues. He had been in and out of hospitals before. But no one flagged him as dangerous. Did the system fail? Did security fail? UPMC Memorial released a statement. They promised change. Stronger security measures. More screenings. Better training for staff. But for the families of the victims, words weren't enough. Then came the governor's response. Josh Shapiro stood before the cameras. His voice was steady, but his eyes told a different story. Officer Duarte gave his life to protect others. We will honor him, and we will do everything in our power to prevent this from happening again. The flags in Pennsylvania were lowered. Officers from across the state wore black bands over their badges. But behind the official statements and press conferences, one truth remained. A police officer was gone. 5 others were wounded. And the people of York, Pennsylvania were left wondering, could this happen again? One hospital. One shooter. One officer never going home. But this wasn't the first time. And it won't be the last. Across the country, hospitals, places meant for healing, have become war zones. In the past year alone, several hospital shootings. Different cities, different names. But the same story. Doctors, nurses, patients, all caught in the crossfire. Security footage. A man walks in. No one stops him. Moments later, screams. Gunshots. Lives shattered. Law enforcement tries to find answers. But there's one question no one can ignore. Why does this keep happening? Experts warn, it's not just crime. It's deeper. Mental health crises. Angry patients. People looking for revenge. Hospitals are supposed to save lives. But now they have to protect them too. More security? More armed guards? Some say it's necessary. Others fear it will make hospitals feel like prisons. Families of the victims are left with grief and anger. A nurse who survived whispered 3 words, "I still hear it." The gunshots. The screams. The voice of a dying officer. And the fear that next time it could be worse. The case of Diogenes Archangel Ortiz is closed. But the story is just beginning. A hospital, a place meant to heal. But on that day, it became a battleground. A police officer went in to protect others. He never came back out. 5 others were wounded. Doctors, nurses, officers, people who just wanted to help. Families got calls they never expected. Tears, pain, unanswered questions. Could this have been prevented? What if security had stopped him at the door? What if someone had noticed the warning signs? What if just one thing had been different? We will never know. But we do know this: Officer Andrew Duarte gave his life to save others. His name should not be forgotten. His sacrifice should mean something. This wasn't just one tragedy. It was a warning. Violence in hospitals is rising. Doctors fear for their lives. Patients don't feel safe. Something has to change. So tonight, as we turn off our screens, as we go back to our lives, remember him. Remember the families who are still grieving. And ask yourself, how many more lives have to be lost before something is done? This story isn't just about what happened. It's about what happens next. A hospital turned into a battlefield. An officer lost his life. Families shattered. But now the question is, could this have been stopped? What do you think? Should hospitals have stronger security? Should warning signs be taken more seriously? Or was this something no one could have predicted? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters.